Well, there's clearly no obligation for white to go into the main line that we've been examining, and there are plenty of ways for him to deviate. We're going to have to examine all of those if we're going to play the Capablanca with any regularity. And we're going to look at a line now which is similar to the one we've just been looking at, but different in the sense that white's not going to touch his H-pawn. He's just going to develop his pieces naturally and see what happens. I think this is an approach which we can expect from a lot of average players, say up to the 2200 mark. White doesn't take black on theoretically in one of the long main lines. He just gets his pieces out and tries to create a game where the better player is going to win. And knight f3 introduces one such system. Well, certainly here white has his traditional idea of going knight e5, which black certainly shouldn't ignore, and thus knight d7 is the recommended procedure against that. And I'm going to use a game between a guy called Vrchotka, and he's playing Dizdarovic. And this is a particularly instructive and typical game because it features an average player against a grandmaster. And it was played in the Pula Open tournament in 2005. And as you'll see from the opening of this game, white does nothing special at all. He's not even trying to gain any sort of opening edge at all. He's just developing naturally and seeing what turns up. And of course the difference is, one of the main differences must be that when white plays bishop d3, black doesn't have to take that bishop because white hasn't forced a concession by playing h4. Thus Dizdarovic thinks to himself, well, why should I bring the white queen into the game? And so plays the perfectly sensible move e6. And of course what this game also shows is typical development for black, which I think is exactly what we need when we come to play this system. And there you can see it, black is just developing his pieces in simple fashion. He readies himself for the middle game. He looks forward to ideas such as c5 or b5. He's ready for moves such as queen to c7 and then rooks to the centre. We don't quite know where black wants his rooks in this position yet. Whether he wants his rooks on e8 and d8 or d8 and c8. That will depend very much on what white does. But at any rate, let's just see what happens in this game, and then perhaps you'll get a better picture of what's going on. Okay, well, with c4, white's trying to claim a very small edge in space and time. Black says, I don't think so, and simply castles. White takes on g6. Not sure whether he should have done that. Perhaps b3 was to be preferred, but, is white really better in this position? For instance, black could play a simple move like a5. Starting to get to grips with white's queenside pawn structure. So white decides to take on g6 and just bring out his bishop in very easy fashion. And now the grandmaster starts to make moves which are very combative and try to take the fight to white. And here comes the move b5. Thematic idea in the Caro Kann, trying to secure the d5 square for a knight. If white takes on b5, I think black is instantly better because of his control of d5. And if white plays b3, which is of course what a lot of people could do, black can take this pawn and then start to create counterplay on the b file or even immediately against c4. So that's another way for black to play. Okay, well, b5 was played. White played rook c1, bringing the last piece into the game. But again, something very thematic now. B takes c4, rook takes c4, and black dissolves his weakness on c6, and with it gains complete equality. Well, knight e5 was played. Rook c8. And the bishop comes out to g5. Knight b6 was played. Rook d1, and now c4. And here we start to see the grandmaster beginning to outplay his less experienced opponent. Because once again, black is concentrating his attention on the central square d5. He really wants to occupy that square, either with a knight or a queen, because that is going to lead to an enhancement of his position. If I had the choice, I'd probably put the queen on d5 because, the queen is going to radiate power on that square and very much inhibit white from creating anything meaningful in this particular middle game. Rook e2 was played. Don't think white can think of what to do, so he just gradually improves the position of his pieces. And as mentioned before, queen to d5. Rook ec2. White thinks he's seen a target. But there we are, ideal placement of the black rooks. And yeah, I think we can assess this position quite safely as slightly better for black. And all this achieved effortlessly in typical Caro Kann fashion. Well, white's got to think about d4, so he brings his knight across to e2. And now king f8. Again, quite an interesting move. Black can't see the possibility of improving any other piece than his king in this position, so readies himself for any potential endgame that might arise with king f8. Also a provocative move in some ways. He's kind of luring white to his doom. White may think that's a mistake and over press. Bishop d6, making room for the king perhaps on e7. Knight comes to c3. Queen a5. Queen comes out to f3. And bishop takes on e5. Queen takes e5. Pawn up to h3. So white is being gradually outplayed, basically. You know, he gives up a pawn, hoping to create some pressure on the dark squares, but it never really turns out that way, because black is able to manoeuvre his pieces into excellent positions there, down the open file. Knight f4. King g8, flexible thinking. No need for the king to remain on f8 now. Black hasn't got a dark square bishop. He's won a pawn. Why not move away? White plays g3. Knight bd5. Rook comes to e2. Eventually, white's going to get his pawn back in this position. But at what cost? The knight comes to d2. And with it, white resigns. So not by any means a great game. I mean, I'm not saying that that's the greatest game ever seen. It's not. But a typical game between somebody who's just developing the pieces and a grandmaster with a specific aim in mind. You know, I think black there displayed ideal development and a readiness to take any opportunity that might arise. A characteristic of the stronger player, I might add.